Hey, good morning, everybody. Today is step 3. How can I trust in God when I don't? Um, Good morning. Thank you, High Five Live, for putting on this show and for allowing me to be of service and to carry a message that has changed my life. So, step 3, would like to back up a little bit and kind of identify where we've been in the previous 2 steps and how they build on one another to arrive at this step 3, which is to make a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. So, hey, Lori, good to see you. Everybody that chimes in, let me know where you guys are from, where you watching from. And yeah, so step 1, we talked about this is the process of admitting that I can't. Step 2 is he can, and step 3 is I'm going to let him. So we can't really do step 3 without doing steps 1, 2, and 3. And I want to also make mention that steps 1, 2, and 3 are actually a practice, not an event. They're micro events that happen on a daily, sometimes hourly basis, where we turn our wills over to our higher power, to God, to Jesus Christ, to the divine order that will allow us to receive this gift of being restored and being redeemed and being free from the obsession of the mind that plagues us to use or to act out compulsively. And so I think it's real important to identify that this is a practice. It's also an experiment. I remember I had worked many step 3s through my journey at the point that I'm going to share this little vignette story. But the one that that deepened my testimony of step 3 was when I needed to quit smoking, wanted to quit smoking. My lungs were starting to feel the pain, and I was wheezing at night and struggling to breathe. And I went to my bishop, or my spiritual leader, and asked him, what do I do when I don't want to quit something? Because I saw these, these symptoms of that weren't good, but what do I do when I still don't want to quit? And, he asked me if I believe that God can help me with my desires and change my desires. And I said, I think so. He said, well, why don't you start praying for the desire to want to quit? And here was my will over here on one side, and I felt like God's will was over here on the other side. And bringing those into alignment felt like a big Grand Canyon of a gap. And when I began to, that was my epiphany moment. That was my aha, where, okay, I can just start this process to pray for the desire to change. And that right there is making a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand him. And as I understand him, remember, in step 2, I had a lot of hangups. I felt that God was very disappointed in me and not available for me. And I felt a lot of distance. And so how do you trust a God when you don't trust that God? And I didn't. And I knew he couldn't trust me. And we just had this distrust between us. But as I walked through steps 1 and 2, and I reinvented or invented a new belief in who I would begin to worship, one that was all powerful, and one that was all forgiving, and one that was always available, that understood addiction, that understood my struggles, one that liked the hobbies that I like skiing and playing the guitar. And it was much easier for me to make a decision to trust a higher power that I could relate with. And so when I began this process of turning my will and my life over to God, it was a series of times, and I continue to do it today on a daily basis, because it's like I'll take my will back and then I'll give it up, and then I'll take it back and I'll give it up. And the one thing that God asks of me is to give him my will and bring our wills into alignment. And I think that that is a really beautiful, beautiful process. I was also talking to one of my best friends, Brian Heaton, who is a person in long-term recovery as well. And I asked him if he had any insights about step 3. And he said, yeah, when I'm working with guys, I like to go back to step 2 and talk about what we're doing here. And what we're doing here is we're coming to believe that God can restore us. And what does restoration mean? And what are we being restored to? And what does that look like? And because where we're going in the roadmap is we're launching into steps 4, 5, 6, and 7. And in those steps, we're offering up our wills. And those wills in our addiction have been very selfish, full of lust, full of greed, full of impatience, full of liabilities. And this process of restoration of our souls and redemption of our souls has to begin with making a decision to want to change all of those things and become a person that seeks to understand rather than be understood, seeks to love rather than to be loved, seeks to give rather than to receive. And, you know, those really help, or Brian's words helped me to share this message with you today about what we're really trying to do is become a new version of ourselves and strip away the ego and strip away the natural man. Because as long as we're in our natural man, the obsessions of the mind and the compulsive behaviors return over and over and over again. And this absolutely relates to addictions such as sugar addiction and behavioral addictions and process addictions, as well as drugs and alcohol and pornography. And so I think it's vital that we identify that when we're making a step 3 decision, we are absolutely experimenting with a practice that can help us change today, that can help us become a better version of ourselves today. And it's not a one-time event, but this is a process where we're literally seeking to become more God-like. And through this process, I have experienced inner change that I didn't know was possible. So at first I would make these decisions and I would really just kind of lean into what I thought God wanted me to become. And as I leaned into him, he leaned into me and began to reinvent who I am. And the benefit of going through this process is, number one, the obsession of the mind begins to be lifted and removed. And it's pretty easy to stay sober, to stay abstinent from our behaviors and our addictions when we don't have the disease chewing on our brain all the time, or voices in our head pushing us to do things that we know are harmful to us and our spirits and to others. That's the first thing. And the second benefit as we go through this process is that we begin to experience emotional sobriety. And it's pretty easy to stay sober and abstinent when we feel the void inside that our addictions have been filling for a while. We feel that void inside start to heal, and the light and the love and the sunlight of the Spirit comes in and closes that hole up. to where we feel more in harmony with ourselves and with God and with mankind. And once again, it's pretty easy to stay sober when you got that stuff going on internally. Those benefits are massive. And this process really, really works. And the 12 steps really break down what the healing power of God is in a simple how-to framework for me and for hundreds of millions of others who have applied this process. So I would love to answer any questions about step 3. I'm going to take the next couple of minutes to maybe answer one or two if you have any. So let me just look in here. Go ahead and type any up if you got one. Kind of putting this to the test, because if no questions come in, then I guess I'm just going to wrap it up. So let's wait and see here. Okay, nothing. Yeah, go ahead and type them in though later. I know it's early and it's Friday morning. So anyway, I'll sign off now. Just know where we're going is step 4. And step 3 is really a decision to go on to the next steps. And, once it was described as you got 3 frogs sitting on a log and one decides to jump in, how many do you have left? And most people say, oh, there's 2. But no, you still have 3, because all that one frog did was make a decision to jump in, but hasn't acted yet. So the action's coming. This is just a decision to leap into the action. So anyway, good morning, everybody. And step 3, what is step 3 again? Thank you, Laura Thomas. Step 3 is to make a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. So that is what step 3 is. Thanks for asking the questions, and have a great weekend. And stay tuned. Next week is step 4, and that's a really good one. That's more mechanics, but also very inspiring. So we'll see you later. Thanks.